thank you guys for coming today. I want to kind of get you guys on a call to get to know each other. One, two, if there's some good content that you guys are talking about, I want to be able, like I said in the emails, capture that, because every individual conversation or kind of group conversation I've had with all you guys has been really impactful. Kind of show you guys off a little more, like you've seen on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. I've posted about you guys individually, but that's the real goal here, is to gather content and then potentially turn that into anything. And good for the foundation, good for you guys, and to get you guys out there as well to our networks to say, hey, check out this great intern, what they're passionate about. What I first wanted to do, go around, quick introduction, who you are, live and go to school, where you're from, what you're studying if you're in school, or where you plan on going to college for our high school folks, and why esports for you. I'll let Coach go first.
Hey everyone, I'm Coach or Connor Olney. I live here in Kansas City, started up the Esports Education Network, which a handful of you are helping me with as a way to help train the professionals entering the esports scene. Been working in esports or in some way involved since 2013. I went to college at the University of Iowa. I studied enterprise leadership, which is like small business development. Yeah, I grew up kind of all over the place. I grew up in a military family, so just kind of bounced around all the time. Our last station was in Germany, where my dad retired out of, decided all of his life that he wanted to farm, so we bought a random farm in the middle of Iowa without ever seeing it. Took vacation to move us back into a little town in Iowa. And then he left for 6 months and stranded us in the middle of nowhere until he retired, came back, and that's how I ended up in Iowa. So I did high school at a little town called Manson. It was recruited to the entrepreneurial program at the University of Iowa, and that's kind of where I got my start. I used to host video game tournaments. I opened up a training facility for esports so that kids could come in and train together as a team and compete. Sold cars for a couple of years. Ultimately ended up coming out to Kansas to start up the varsity program for Ottawa University. We built a 200-person spectator arena, which was like one of a handful in the country. I served as their first head coach, which is where my nickname comes from. Moved up to executive director there, where I still oversee that program and their coaches and staff to make sure that program's going in the right direction and being successful. And at that time was when I joined the staff here at the Varsity Esports Foundation to make a difference not only at the college level, but for high schoolers and younger kids, and just making sure everyone knows their path in esports. That's kind of my thing. Growing up in the military and then retiring to Iowa, I didn't really ever feel like I belonged necessarily. At the same time, I was always a very competitive person though. So like I tried a bunch of different sports. In high school, I did wrestling like really competitively, but never really like hung out with the wrestlers or like felt like I belonged. And I found myself playing video games a lot. When I first heard the word esports and found out it was like a thing, that was when I went all in on that. So I was a Call of Duty player. That was my game. That was the game I grinded path to pro. Ultimately, I didn't obviously make pro. That's why I'm here. That's what got me into it. So there you go, Bubba.
So my name is Yoon. If you guys have trouble pronouncing it, just like 12 o'clock noon, midday, basically. I currently go to North Kansas City High School. I live in KC, kind of spent like almost a third of my life here. And esport because I have been watching LCS and the League of Legends scene, both in and out of the North American region since I was like 10. So basically since the start of League of Legends esport, basically. And it's something that I basically grew up with. That, and also a lot of my experiences when it comes to esports stem from my family. They used to own like an internet cafe kind of thing. That's me with gaming, and I also have two older brothers, so there's that. That's where most of my passion for esports stem from. So I guess that would be my reason for why esport. Colleges that I want to go to, I'm kind of aiming for USC, UCLA, but at the end of the day, it really depends on scholarship wise.
My name is Zach. I am a senior at Rockhurst University in Kansas City. I have grown up in Kansas City my whole life. I'm studying sports management with a pre-MBA minor. I chose esports because I grew up playing baseball and traditional sports my whole life. I suffered from really bad injuries, but video games were always there, and they were always something to do when I was going through therapy and all these different things. And then when I finally had to quit playing baseball, it's just something that I got really interested in and want to pursue my career in that.
I'm Paul. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I just graduated from Regis University here in Denver, and I'm planning on doing my master's in business at the University of Northern Colorado starting in the fall. I chose esports kind of like Zach. I also grew up playing sports my whole life. I played baseball and soccer through high school and a little bit of college soccer. So just anything around sports, and esports is a good kind of transition from traditional sports to online, and esports industry is growing and it'll only get bigger. So I think it's a good place to get into.
My name is Alexia Oscano. I'm from from San Antonio, Texas. So I currently attend the University of Texas at San Antonio, studying communications. I just switched from computer science, which is kind of in part due to esports, actually. It's back when like COVID was just starting to get worse around here. There was the intercollegiate game night, which I attended some panels, engaged with some of the folks. And then after that, I volunteered to be a moderator. And I learned more through that than when I started being like an officer for my gaming club as well, just like last year. I learned a lot more about esports in the past like 2 months, 3 months than I did just starting out as like an officer where no one really knew. And I wanted to take that effort to actually get to know esports and more about collegiate gaming to help not only the club, but also find more engaging passion for myself, because I've loved video games my whole life, but I didn't realize you could actually make a career out of it.
Hi, I'm Meredith. I'll be a senior at the University of Kansas like this coming fall. Technically, I'm from Kansas, but kind of like Connor, I was actually a military brat, so I moved around a lot. I'm studying behavioral neuroscience and I have a minor in economics. So I'm like really into the psyche side of a lot of the things that I pursue. Esports in particular, I got into League. I've kind of known about the game and I had friends who've played, but I didn't really actually start playing till then. Absolutely loved it, completely obsessed. I played it so much, especially when quarantine happened and my classes, everything got moved online. So I'd go to Zoom class, go play a few games of League, go to Zoom class. I kind of realized how toxic, like I'd heard people talk about how toxic League was, but I didn't know really how toxic it was until I tried doing ranked and found myself in tears one night when I literally did nothing wrong. I would like to assume I didn't do anything wrong, but I just wasn't probably playing at that level people wish. Because, when you do your placements, they put you with like silver and gold people, even if you're probably iron or bronze. After realizing how like torn up I felt about that and being such an optimistic person, I really wanted to like understand the toxic side of gaming communities, and like that kind of helps with my major, like understanding the psychology behind gamers, and are there better preventive measures we can take with students going into esports, like telling them not to be like this, or just providing coping measures with how to deal with toxicity so it doesn't like put them into the state that I felt.
My name is Rafael Villagomez. I'm currently attending South County High School. Why esports? I guess because of its potential, not only on like the business aspect, but also really in the student and like kid aspect. I think there's a lot of potential for kids to grow in esports. Like there's a lot of opportunities that it presents. A lot of those same opportunities derive from like conventional sports. I look at esports, this is a way that every kid can have those same benefits that conventional sports have without even if they're not as athletic. This is always like a means to get to build themselves up in a team environment. I guess I always saw esports not really as a real like legitimate thing, like tangible thing for myself until I realized how like serious it was getting. So I guess I just started with my friends, and then I really started building up my club at the high school. From there, I've just been able to meet a lot of kids who before esports, they just really weren't like socially interactive. They weren't like socializing very, very well with other kids in the school. And so being able to meet these players, it really like drove me forward to like really be the best person to sort of like provide them that opportunity to really socialize and interact through esports. And that's what I found has been like really valuable in this entire journey, this internship and everything.
My name is Carter Mann. I go to the University of Kansas. I just finished my undergraduate degree this spring. I will be starting my master's in the fall for sport management as well. I'm from a small town called Wellsville, Kansas, kind of where it's not really acceptable to, I guess, game very often. It's kind of frowned upon. It's more of like a farm-based town, very traditional, old school style of life. I've always been a gamer, so it's something that I wasn't ever really, I was always very nervous to even say anything to anybody about it because I was afraid of the way they would view me. But like Zach and Paul, I played sports. Growing up all the time, I played basketball, football, baseball. Why esports? Originally, I kind of just wanted to work in the NBA. I figured I liked the NBA and basketball a lot, so that would be something that I would enjoy. Ultimately, I've always had a passion for gaming. I guess just from all the outside sources telling me to, just get a real job. Like you can't really make money off video games. I always just believed them, and then kind of after talking with Bubba for a while one day at lunch, I just saw that there is a real opportunity here. So kind of just didn't look back ever since. So just looking forward to seeing where it can take me now.
Hi, I'm Masuma. I'm in Houston, Texas. I go to the University of Houston and I'm studying computer engineering technology with a minor in media production. I got into esports a little more last year actually because I took an esports history kind of marketing class, which was really interesting and gave me a lot of opportunities to kind of branch out and pursue that. I've been streaming since 2013 I think. I've played video games my entire life. I always thought I'd go into the more engineering aspect, like building PCs and stuff like that for a living, but I've kind of gravitated towards doing production for big events. I've worked a various number of events in the last year for esports itself, and so it's just something that's always kind of caught my attention, and it's just fun seeing people kind of light up when they come to a show or like have fun after a concert and stuff like that.
So kind of what I want to do is we've talked about toxicity a lot as a topic we've mentioned, a couple of us mentioned. Toxicity, diversity, inclusion. Diversity, inclusion is not just race and female, male. I want to dive into, and this is an open discussion because one, I want people to hear. I want this to be a platform for you guys, and we've talked about that, but also this opportunity here. I'm very vocal about systemic racism from myself and from the foundation. Feel less complacent now because society is catching up, hopefully, to shine a light. I think it's important to talk about race, gender, toxicity in gaming because of either of those things. Obviously, our big focus at the foundation is access for those schools that don't get treated the same as, schools with a lot of students who look like me. Kind of want to open it up. Toxicity, diversity, inclusion, gaming. This is a platform for you guys to talk, and then somebody's going to say something to agree with you or disagree with you, and I think it's a good forum for that.
Specifically for Overwatch, I know there's a lot of, stigmas, like negative stigmas towards actually like female players. Like whenever I play or try to queue up, I see a lot of the time it's almost looked down upon when somebody realizes that, oh, we have a female player in our game and she's playing like a skilled hero, like a hero that sort of like you need like a lot of skill for. And I think that's like, obviously that's very wrong. Just even more generally, like if they're playing anything other than like a healer role, it's looked down upon. And I think that's something that sort of needs to be addressed in like a very major aspect. I don't see it getting talked about a lot, specifically from Blizzard or any of the big companies. Like I guess they don't. I'm not sure if they like care so much about it. However, like that is something that I think is a major problem. I'm sure that this occurs not only for Overwatch but in probably a lot of other game titles. This is just like a personal experience.
From my side, on the League of Legends side, there's the player base and generally likes to generalize the female population when it comes to the game. In League of Legends, for example, things would be like, oh, all females play support, and then it would be like, oh, support roles are easy, or all females play ardent support, which is kind of insulting in a way, even though that's completely not true, right? Because there are a lot of females and a lot of streamers I watch too that does not play support, and me personally, I do not play support, and the support role is one of the most challenging role in the game. And when someone carries the game, right, so be it a mid laner or a top or an ADC, if they carry the game, the language that is being used generally fall into the male side. It's almost like the player base cannot accept the fact that a female carried the game, or that a female is playing a carry champion, or that a female is playing a champion that require a lot of mechanical skills. I see that differences, and it's not only in League of Legends, like it's in Overwatch, and I'm very sure it's almost in all of the other games.
Do you think it's because with video games and competition, it's the first time because men are conditioned in sports to play separately, or that we're used to just winning and like it's like a fun thing to play against girls, and now esports is causing us to actually have to like be on the same playing field and outperform? Do you think that goes into it?
Personally, as a guy, I guess it can be hard to admit, just like, oh wow, we really just got owned. That's like sort of the beauty of it, right? Like it actually does allow for that. Like, there isn't that physical aspect that you see in sometimes in wrestling or track and field. Like in esports, it's really open up to everybody. And so when that happens, I can definitely see like toxicity growing from that, from guys specifically, when they feel like, oh wow, they just got owned by a girl, or they're letting a girl carry them in game.
I think a big thing too right now is like the lack of representation in the pro scene. If you look at almost like any pro scene, with the exception of CSGO, right? Because CSGO, when it comes to female pro, is probably one of the biggest scene out there when it comes to female pro. Almost any other gaming scene, if you're talking about the LCS, LPL, the Overwatch scene, Dota, any of that, it's only male that are pro, right? Yeah. And then the general assumption that people have when it comes to that is like, oh, the reason why girls are not in the pro scene is because like guys are mechanically more advanced, right? In reality, like a lot of girls that have like pro level skill do not go pro because the level of toxicity, the hate that they get, even like the mere fact that they play a role that is not generally accepted for female is is something that they can receive a lot of hate for on social media, on Twitter, generally push away the female population when it comes to the pro scene. And so I think that adds into a lot when it comes to the toxicity between genders in games. It's not only the lack of representation, but also how much we tend to push away pros that are not male.
I think like another thing with that is going back to like traditional sports. Sports itself were just always like a male dominated area, like originally. And even now, if you compare, let's say, the NBA to like the WNBA, you're always going to get some backlash for the female sports, no matter what it is. With esports, like, yes, female players can become pro because you have more of an opportunity to do that. It's just with years and years of like this constant fighting between males and females when it comes to being equal or like represented. And that's why it's gone into esports as well. Even though it's just gaming, it's still looked as at, okay, they need to belong there, we're going to belong over here.
With that being said, I feel like so many people, like as soon as a girl does go into the gaming world, guys and other girls even accuse them of, you're doing that for attention. You don't actually like to play video games. You're just doing it because you're this cutesy girl who's going to play and you're going to get attention because you're going to have guys that will go and watch just for the fact that you're a girl rather than the fact that you're like actually good. I think, Zach, in our last meeting we had, you talked about there was a girl on an esports team who wasn't even being like approached in interviews because she was a good like player, but rather because she was a girl. So they wanted to hear all about her experience as a female player rather than her experience like actually playing the game.
I'm gonna throw another question because I have two theories, and that was one of them, and I kind of think they feed into each other about toxicity in women and all of this. I think the other one, I mean, all the way back to like Xbox Live, right? Like it's always been toxic and people just saying ridiculous things. And my theory is that it's the first time a community has set its own cultural rules with no parental control. How you grow up, it defines how you talk. Like if you grew up in a church, if you grew up in a, like whatever kind of culture or community you grew up with kind of defines how you act, what your moral code is. And with gaming, we all developed that as immature teenagers on Xbox Live, and it just kind of continued. And there was no moral agenda set for how you act online. Because of that, people don't share the same morals that they do in real life. You talk online way different than you would talk in person, or like a lot of guys do. And that's my theory, is that the cultural norms that were set by the people that were playing and not generations of teaching kids how to behave. That's caused a spiral effect of toxicity in gaming. And I think you combine that with the competitive nature of men and the history of sports. That's my theory, but I would love to hear what you guys think.
I've grown up in like a sheltered household, and both me and my brother played games. He plays more like online for sure, especially with friends nowadays, but he's already in college and he still like yells, bangs on his desk. My parents have not really told him anything, even though I complain all the time. I'm like, he does not need to be doing this playing a game. I definitely don't do it. I get frustrated sometimes. I might raise my voice a little, or I might just tell my teammates who are usually my friends. I don't usually talk on mic with strangers. Hey, can this get done? It needs to get done. And even my boyfriend, it's hard to get him to calm down sometimes because he's like, I'm so competitive that like I just don't know how to release it. And I'm like, you don't need to be yelling or saying like weird things to everyone on the mic that can hear you. It doesn't really do anything, I think, but it's just been so ingrained into them for playing video games since like Xbox Live, PlayStation, like just those online games, and where I guess parents just didn't want to pay attention to their kids screaming for no reason on those games. I don't know why that way may have been the case. I just know like if I were to have an outburst, for me, I would more likely get in trouble than like my brother was back then when he was younger, like 10, 12 or whatever, playing those games. Because I guess it was just seen as like, oh, he's young, he needs to find a way to release it or something like that.
I think another thing with that is that when it comes to like gaming itself, you're behind a screen. People don't know who you are. People can't see you. You act differently because you don't face any consequences. And that's one of the biggest things. And yeah, you know, most companies have tried to limit toxicity, but there's only so much they can also do because you're not facing anything. You can say something to someone, it may affect them, but you're not getting anything back from that. You just move on to the next thing and that's it for you.
The idea of traditional sport history here with the coaching and refereeing from the stands. As a longtime referee at the high school and recreational level and being a director over sport programs, I always had an issue with coaching from the stands, refereeing from the stands. Well, the reason I had an issue with it was because that example that parents and coaches were showing from the sidelines of the stands was an example that those kids now on the bench could maybe yap at the ref or, oh, that's a travel. Come on, referee. This kind of energy in a gym kind of takes shape once one team the stand starts complaining about a travel, and then the other team says, well, yeah, call it both ways. And then the kids on the bench start saying stuff, and the coach says something, or the coach thinks he's fighting for his players because no way my kids are getting hurt. We as a society have pushed this narrative to our kids. It's okay to talk back to referees or other players. But then the good sportsmanship is good and shake their hand at the end. But it's happening on the court and in the stands. So now, like, the self-governing of a kid playing and the illusion of our parents actually guiding us at a young age, especially boys, when it's a digital babysitter for most of us. Even I'm guilty of it. Like, kids, mom and dad are working right now. Can you go and play Minecraft real quick or watch a movie? It happened. Parents, as an example, aren't doing a good job in traditional sports, and then us parents aren't doing a good job at digital citizenship for kids in video games because, like you said, it's self-governing but badly.
I remember I got the PlayStation 2 the very first day it came out. My mom bought it for us. I mean, that was when it all started. And then once I got older, it's kind of like she tried to pry that away from us. But that was her way of whenever she was at work or, whatever it was just a way for me and my brother to not be fighting with each other. So we each had our own consoles, and that's kind of how I learned to cope socially. And obviously I played sports, but outside of that, I didn't really hang out with friends often. But now my friends on Xbox are closer than a lot of my friends in, I guess, real life that I see physically every day. I would say that parenting, at least from my end, is very controversial when it comes to that.
I'm a firm believer in this. A potential solution for all of that is actually because there's always this negative stigma from both parents and not only that, but especially schools. When you look at gaming specifically, they see gaming as okay, that's not a good thing. That takes away time from your studies. It's just all up to the kid. So that sort of leaves the kid, okay, gaming, not a good thing. They go home, they play these games, and they sort of just release everything. However, I think a good fix for this would actually be the opposite of that. When schools actually adopt esports, adopt games, not only does that sort of remove all of that, it's only on the kids if they're playing games, and it's not a good thing if they are. Instead, it changes the narrative, and it's okay, no, this is a school promoted activity. This is something that will get you scholarships, will get you through college. And through that, they actually sort of gain some control over the kids and their toxicity levels, because through that, they can say okay, if you're going to play in our program, no yelling, no cursing, none of this stuff. And that all starts at the high school, middle school level, where they can sort of learn that, there's accountability for their actions when they talk in game. And that all comes back, and parents will see that, and they, they'll start to actually support their kids rather than being a negative narrative. So that's one thing that I found to be I really believe in.
Right now, we're trying to do a long-term study, and we're setting something up. Right now, it's just in the shape of a survey where students that are undergoing the VEF's program, we're trying to see at the start of the program versus when they leave or when they graduate, how the relationship between friends and family has improved, their academic standing, how that's improved, and then their own kind of sense of belonging and self-esteem, because a lot of these kids that do play video games maybe aren't aware that they can do it in a team setting. Our hope is that we can show teachers, parents, that letting your kid join an esports club and then supporting them in doing so is actually in the long run way more beneficial for them than just letting them maybe play off on their own and then kind of harassing them for it because you think that they're wasting their time. But if you put them in a setting that is guided, giving them a coach or a teacher, showing them the practical way of playing without being super toxic, our goal in the end is to show that putting a student in esports club or supporting them in that world is actually better in the long run than shoving them off to the side. And so we're hoping to show that between, like I said, academic standing, sense of self-esteem, and then the relationship between parents and friends.
I was talking to a streamer, content friend of mine. His name's Jack Zilla. I don't know if you guys know him. He's really funny. He lives in Canada. He's I don't know, I think he's early 30s. And he's kind of an intimidating dude. He's got a big beard and but he's super positive, and I like him. We did this experiment where you go into a lobby, and before anyone has the opportunity to say anything to you, you're just super positive. Start off, instantly set the tone as this really happy vibe. Quite a few of the games, it turned into this super fun lobby of just people having a good time. Interesting to see how little of a thing can set the mood for a lobby.
I feel like that works sometimes. I know for League, it's really hard to do that because the community is just so toxic. I've had plenty of days where I'll pop in and be like, hey guys, and somebody will just tell me to shut up. And I'm like, okay, cool.
And like, here's the thing too, your mastery, I have 2 mastery 7 support players, but I like don't really play rank. I'm good enough to be good, maybe not competitively good. So I had an ADC that was trying to get their last mastery token to get rank up. And they're like, okay, support, we're going to have a great game. You're going to carry me. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have a fun game. I messed up at the very beginning because they overextended. I couldn't really save them because I was playing like an eco support. So I didn't really have much early game. They just completely went off at me. They started off, the tone of the game I thought was going to be great. They're looking to like just have fun, maybe get that last mastery S. And then it just went so downhill from there because that one mishap at the very beginning. And then they just blame me for everything when they continuously overstepped and maybe pushed out. And it was just not fun.
As someone who's played support competitively, the last 2 years, that's what I did for my university, which is weird because I'm not a support main, but I still got stuck support. What I've learned, at least, is that you just focus on your own gameplay. If they flame you, they flame you. You can't change that. You just be like, okay, team, let's do this. Let's do that. As a League player, at least, I've switched roles so many times. I was an ADC main. I went to mid for a year. I went to support for the last 2 years, and now I'm jungling because I'm very verbal when I play. So I can make call outs. I can be like, okay, go do this. You need to do this. Once you have more game sense and like experience in the game too, you stop caring about everybody else. You just focus on yourself and be like, okay, do this. If you don't do it and you die, it's not my fault.
I think part of the problem with trying to set the positive mood and the reason why it doesn't work in League is such a big community. And then when you say certain things and then people reply to you, you don't know where the line is, whether or not if it's a joke or if it's meant to be something offensive or something like serious. Let's say you go in, you're like super positive, right? And then someone just, you're cringe, shut up. If someone else say, hey, that's mean or whatever, the other person would just be like, oh, I'm joking. And then like that's where the toxicity lies. What is joking and what is not joking? There's no defined line as to where a joke stops and then where does a person's feeling hurt and where does that matter.
Hit them with a ooh woo when they start coming at me and then they like back off.
What's the take in comparison here? The 2K smack talk compared to toxicity. What's the line? What's the line? I mean, I play pickup basketball and we talk smack all the time. Like, oh yeah, airball or you're trash or whatever. I mean, I actually Charlie, one of the HSCL guys, his 10-year-old kids played Fortnite with me or Call of Duty the other night with me, and they pretty much smack talked me the whole time because I don't play on console and I got berated by 10-year-old twin boys. The smack talk in sport games a little different. What do you think?
I don't think 2K is near as toxic as Call of Duty, especially if you're just playing like multiplayer lobbies. The Modern Warfare 2 clips of the toxicity levels they're legendary. I mean, it's ridiculous. Even back with like 2K, going back to the gender difference thing, this is the first year where they've added the WNBA teams into 2K, but they still don't have my players that are female. I personally have only encountered one female, and I play endless amounts of hours pretty much every day. I've only ran into one female that I've played with or against. I think they're going to be making strides with that in the up and coming years, just because, I mean, the fact that now they have the WNBA in there, my player is a next step for that. And I think mainly because men have traditionally been known to be like more dominant in sports. And especially if you're playing in the park, you don't want to have a woman just go up and dunk on you. So I think that's something that like 2K thinks about, in the sense is they don't want the consumers they don't want to be like taken back by that, because I would say the majority of their player base is males. But yeah, going back to toxicity as well, I just think that I've never really played anything outside of Call of Duty 2K. I played Rainbow Six for a little bit, but I think Call of Duty's right there at the top for toxicity levels.
In terms of other games, I don't know like how to describe it, but in general on Call of Duty, any game you play, people get super defensive if they lose, or if somebody says something, it's an automatic snapback. It's not like one of those like you can take it. Traditional sports, if somebody says something to you, you're not going to say what you would say online. And so I don't know where the difference is there, but if it was treated like more traditional, parents looked at it as something that was more traditional, where there had to be sportsmanship. You don't have to win all the time and then get super aggressive or defensive either way. Maybe it could solve some of the issues.
See, this was one of my biggest things when I was a coach that I struggled with, was interactions with the kids, because of this culture that like we're so used to. It's just like with your best friends, like we make fun of each other. Like if you're friends, you're like cordial, and your best friends, you just trash talk all the time. And gaming, that's kind of a thing. And with like my team and my kids, kind of like we allowed a certain level level of it, they would kind of say some stuff, and how you would win your respect is like if you could clap back harder, or if like you could out trash talk them. That was how I assert my dominance or whatever. And so we had this kind of fun banter that on the outside everyone would look at as disrespectful. What is going on here? For us, it was almost a mutual sign of respect. Hey, my coach can out trash talk me. And so I've always been torn. Is that okay? Or even it's building rapport with them, it's setting the wrong tone. I don't know. That's been something I've struggled with.
Esports is trying to make its footprint big, the business side and just everything, right? When it comes to an industry trying to grow and trying to be bigger, there have to come a level of professionalism. 2010, 2011, like esports was nothing. It wasn't. And so the professionalism level wasn't there because no one considered it. But now that esports is a $1 billion industry right now, and it's only going to grow. It's one of the fastest growing industry out there. There have to be a level of expectations that have to be set. When that expectation is not there, and you see it with teams on the pro team too, it's like some of the jokes can be seen as joke, but then there's like an underlying toxicity level that is already there, and then the pro teams are just letting it go, and like they're just leaving it there, and they're not dealing with it in a professional way. And when that blows up, it becomes a very dramatic experience for everyone in the industry, in the general gaming community of set games. And so I feel like from the level of college and high school, there have to be a level of professionalism set. I'm not saying that like jokings and all of that is bad, because I do trash talk my friend when I play with them, but there have to be like a guideline somewhere. There have to be a level somewhere.
I like to take off of what you guys are getting at, especially Noon, when you talked about from the top down, from the publisher's perspective, the game creators, how publishers are supporting from the top down. What do you guys see in the sense of console versus PC at tournaments and events and in schools, and compared to maybe urban and suburban between console and PC? This I know is a really big issue. Why do we see a difference in console to PC, especially with consoles in an urban center where maybe that's accessibility compared to PC because they want to go pro because pros are supporting PC game? So I kind of want to explore that and see what you guys thoughts on. I have plenty of thoughts, but I'd love to hear from your perspective.
PC right now is super big and it's the biggest, right? But I think part of the reason why is because when you look at majority of the PC's games, the reason why they're big is because of the production level of their show, basically. Like when people go to watch the League of Legends final, the World Championship, when people go to watch the Fortnite Championship or the Overwatch or Dota, they don't come to watch a game. I promise you, a third of the people that go to League of Legends World Championship does not come for the game. They come for the show. They come for the concert. They come for the light show. They come for like the animation, everything that makes the environment just like super hype. Even if you're watching it through a screen, it's super hype. But that's not the level of production that you see when it comes to console, when it comes to the Switch, the PlayStation, the Xbox. And that's where you see the disparity when it comes to tournaments, when it comes to prize pool, all of that. If a tournament is not hype, then no one want to watch it, right? So then everyone starts to gravitate towards PC, and then console just kind of like bleh.
Another thing is just accessibility. For consoles, you have to pay for the console. You have to pay for extra accessories. You have to pay for the games themselves. Well, right now with PC gaming, most games have become free to play. You can become a pro without even having to buy the game. That's the thing. A lot of games like League, Dota, most of the games nowadays are free on PC, and that brings in more of an audience. Anyone with a computer can play. For mobile gaming, anyone with a phone or a tablet can play. Another big thing that I think why PC is kind of on a higher ground there when it comes to this, because console gaming has been around for a very long time, but they still follow traditional methods where you buy a console, you buy the game with it. And, you know, they have sales, and here and there they do have free games or free software, but overall PC is dominating. They've already reached such a big audience, and it's good for entry-level gamers to kind of get into it, because you can play games on your phone. Kids do that, and that's like an early access to that. If it's free, most of the time you're going to draw in a much larger audience.
The only thing I really have to say is that the Call of Duty League is on console, and that's mostly because Call of Duty's fan base comes from console, as it's just been popular on console more than PC over like the past decade, 2 decades even. The question would be there, I guess, wouldn't it be easier to just develop skills on a keyboard and mouse? Because I know, to me, controllers have always felt kind of weird, and there's aim assist on some games, so does that like change any of the validity of the skills that's happening there? Or does having better PC components, even if there may be like standardization between leagues and stuff like that, but does a a PC component make you actually better than what you are, sort of thing. So I don't know if there's just like a bunch of problems when it comes to realizing how to be a pro, because I feel like PC is kind of unfair in that kind of way. Whereas console, for Call of Duty especially, you can think of it as just being like a lot more standardized.
Probably the most, I don't want to say, I'm not sure if it's like the most relevant, but definitely the most, or arguably the most innovative esports scene out there right now being the Fortnite esports scene. You know, this is something that you've never seen before, where both keyboard players and console controller players are actually coming together and playing in this all-encompassing scene. And a lot of those problems you just mentioned, people are actually taking notice those problems because of aim assist that those controller players have. I believe it was the last, I'm not sure, it was some major esport tournament where I think the top 5 players were all controller players, and that drew a lot of questions. The only person I think in top 5 was, there's only one person in top 5 that was a keyboard and mouse player. And so you can sort of see where that, how does this really all merge into each other? Is this something that can actually work? I think it's good in the sense that we're sort of able to bridge that gap and bring those players together and come play together. But at the same time, you know, you are going to find those problems where people believe, oh, you know, the controller player has the advantage because of the aim assist and things like that. And I guess I'm not super knowledgeable on the situation to give a stance, but I do know that it is something that they probably will have to address sooner or later. Specifically for Fortnite, they continue to do their esports scene. That is something that I think that they should address and potentially nerf if it really is as bad as I've heard it is, in terms of controller players and keyboard players like having a disadvantage, then yeah, that might be a problem.
I don't know the difference of getting killed between a controller player and a keyboard and mouse player because I die equally the same. But I hear a lot of aim assist questions about it from top streamers. They've kind of made their stance and maybe they will nerf it. Yeah, Call of Duty is great as a cross-platform, and I get to play with all my friends who don't have a nice PC like me, which is fun. And I think all this whole conversation is good because we've got good perspectives. Because to Masuma is what you're saying about free games. I never really kind of thought that side because I'm thinking about these kids that maybe from the top down of like EA Sports, which Noon is a big company, actually, who's been around for a while, that has a lot of power, but they're not pushing that money down like Epic would for those big events in those stadiums and those arenas. When I go to the fighting game community scene with the old monitors, the old PlayStations, and the old Nintendo Switches or whatever, and they're all playing, having a lot more fun than the kids that are over on the Fortnite, 8 players sitting there playing quads, and they're having a much better time. But it's also, like we said, accessibility for free games on PC and accessibility for mobile. So the numbers are, the gaming industry is a $160 billion industry. Esports is sexy, and it's almost a $2 billion industry now, by the way. COVID definitely has pumped up the numbers recently. But mobile gaming is half of that. It's half of $160 billion. And you'll see it a lot more prevalent in foreign countries as well, which I think some of us have talked about. But I think it's good perspective that we have kind of the free game from PC console. What I was really wanting to get at was why we were built, why our foundation exists, is urban students don't have the same access as suburban students. And where is it coming from? Is it coming from systemic racism with property taxes and issues where schools aren't getting the funding they need in the urban cores like suburban schools do with higher priced homes and more accessibility? Or is it also because of publishers and they are pushing console because it's cheaper to get a console than it is a nice PC? So there's this debate, but I think it's really everybody.
Terms of accessibility to the competitive scene between console and PC. Because personally for me, I actually found it a lot harder to get into at least attempt to get into a competitive environment for like Overwatch, because I was originally going to get it like for the PlayStation 4, but then I realized that the Overwatch League, they only do PC. So I actually ended up spending a lot more money trying to get access to get that competitive scene to potentially make it that way by buying a high-end PC that'll actually run Overwatch. And not only that, but I actually do believe a lot of the popular games like Fortnite, and I think maybe Rainbow Six, I'm not sure, actually do require more high-end PCs now with all the updates that have been coming out, especially Fortnite. I know for a fact that it's almost to a point where you can't just have any computer. So in terms of that, I'm not super aware of who really has the advantage. I guess it's really circumstantial at that point.
I think it's that, and also a lot of it is preference as well. because for me, I prefer to play on my computer, an FPS or something on my computer compared to a console, just because I'm used to that. And that goes back to like the fighting game community too. You see a lot of players with their own fight sticks and stuff like that in like competitive scene. There's that debate again where, oh, does that make them good or do they just have an advantage? And it's going to be with every game because there's just so many options now on how to play.
What Bubba said with the access to the competitive scenes in terms of being in a suburban area versus an urban area right now. Like I live in a not so nice part of Kansas City and my house has like the slowest Wi-Fi you can imagine. So if I wanted to try and go pro, I feel like that would kind of be impossible for my situation because I wouldn't even be able to stay in a game long enough because of the internet that we can afford and all that stuff. I'm trying to think of people who have worse situations than me who just are in it to play the games and they're watching all this and they want to get into it, but it's not possible because it's expensive both ways. It's expensive to own a PC and it's expensive to own console.
And Zach, that's a good point. How do we translate that for esports literacy to society? Because society, yes, tells us we are bad, stay in the basement, drink your soda, eat your chips, right? That's what society's been telling us for 40 years. And to your point, how do we tell that story better in comparison using traditional sports of, well, I mean, your kid wants to go to college and be a student athlete. Well, you've got to afford better cleats and you got to afford a better school so they'll get looked at because they're not going to look at you at this school and they're not going to look at you for this reason here. And if you don't have somebody recording your gameplay and putting it on Huddle or Max Preps and your coach isn't doing stuff, those are definite things that the traditional sports scene and parents have seen, like, I've got to do this for my kid, or kid, I need to talk to my coach. My coach supports that. And that's what's happening. And there's more and more organizations in the esports space figuring that out and more parents figuring it out. But accessibility is a huge issue. A lot of folks definitely in this space think internet should be utility. It should be something provided to everyone equally for equal access broadband, so everyone has the ability. And what are the numbers, Coach? 340 million people in the United States, 50 million people don't have
50 million people don't have access to internet or a computer
in the United States. And I think there's 40 million teenagers in the United States. So 40 million people around your age in the United States, and 5 to 9 million of those students don't have access.
It's at home access. Like
Yeah, home access. Right, exactly. Because, yeah, you go to the library if COVID wasn't happening, or you can go to your school if your school was open.
To piggyback off of that, the societal support system thing, I see things from like multiple perspectives because I'm an immigrant. If you look at the esports scene, if you look at the biggest esports scene internationally, right, like that's China and Korea, like there's no doubt about that. And that's mainly because there's a societal support system there. If someone wants to pursue pro gaming as a career, there is a path that they can go on, just like how if I wanted to be a doctor, there's a path I can go on. I can go to school, I can go to college, med school, get my certification, do my internship, residency, all that, right? Similar to that, there is a path when it comes to pro gaming in Korea and China because there's less of a stigma around it because pro gamers there are treated as celebrities, basically, like how we would treat Ariana Grande. That's how Korea treat Faker. Here, our esports scene isn't big and it's not great. It's probably one of the worst, even though we have more money than any of the other esports scene out there. The NA esports scene is very rich, yet we are not big. And that's mainly because we don't have social support system. We don't have a way for these high schoolers and middle schoolers to get to be a pro team manager or coaches or finance analysts, any of that, right? Like there's no path, but not only that, there's no guidance. There's none of that because our support system see pro gaming or see the esports scene as a bad thing because we don't have an understanding level of that compared to, the bigger ones.
Good thing you guys get to be a part of fixing that. All you interns here for the Varsity Esports Foundation get to be a part of creating that opportunity and helping give guidance, like Noon said. I mean, Noon, do you want to be our spokesperson for this? We want to get you? No, but thank you for what you guys have said today. Like this is why we're getting together. One, to get, like I said, get to know everybody, share passions, share gamer tags, play some games together. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you all.
Varsity Esports Foundation. Founded in December 2018, the Varsity Esports Foundation was created by a group of esports professionals. Our mission is to create an inclusive, safe, and aspirational network of gaming communities for all. The Varsity Esports Foundation is a 501c3 organization established to offer financial assistance to schools and to provide a pipeline for students to reach their potential through esports. We have 4 foundation goals. 1. Build a network of inclusive gaming communities. 2. Create scholarships for students within these communities. 3. Ensure a safe environment for all players. And 4. Promote gaming literacy across the ecosystem. The foundation has funds for a limited amount of assistance to support schools with league fees and/or computer equipment. For more information, please visit us at varsityesportsfoundation.org. Varsity Esports Foundation, a pipeline for students to reach their potential through esports.